What's the difference of passenger flying in China versus the United States? I travel to these two countries very often. They're two huge aviation markets, but two very different philosophy and two completely different passenger experience. Let's deep dive. So first, let's take a look at the stats. In the US, there are about 870 million of passengers flown annually. And in China, the number is catching up. They have about 740 million passengers travel annually. So the gap is closing. China has been spending the last 2 decades building some of the world's newest and largest airports. These airports are massively modern and extremely high-tech with sleek architecture everywhere. A common features including high-speed train connectivity, immense terminal space, sometimes too large for the walking comfort, and you'll find facial recognition boarding, automated baggage drops. So recently I flew into the city of Xi'an, which has a new Terminal 5 just opened. When I arrived, I felt like I walked into a shopping mall, and there was so much restaurants and shops, I forgot I was at an airport. What's amazing at the baggage carousel is they installed a camera, so you can see how your bags get loaded, and there's no more chance for the baggage loader to smash your bags. And if that's not amazing, then there is a toilet monitor. And before you use the toilet, it tells you how busy the toilets are. It also tells you how's the air quality. And on top of all of that, there's also a museum built at the terminal. It is in the land side, which has all the history of Xi'an. So for those frequent flyers flying in and out of China, you will recognize the security is always tight. There's now an extra layer of security at the entrance of the terminal. So your bags and your personal belongings will all get swapped and then will be checked if there's any explosive. Only if that's cleared, you will be allowed to enter to the check-in area of the terminal. In addition, at the regular security channel, you have to remove all electronics, regardless whether it's battery bank, whether it's camera, lens, anything that is electronics, it has to be placed separately. So a lot of flying in China are done straightly point to point. Very few people are actually need to transit through an airport. Lots of airport doesn't support the transit infrastructure. So you end up arriving on a flight, you have to go outside, back to the land side, recheck in for your flight, go through the security, back to the air side, and wait for your next flight. This is the situation now to test an airline. It's not about the service now, it's about the recovery. Now we're delayed, and now they've been told all of us have to deplane, and they have to find us another plane, or are they going to fix the 747 to fly again? So now I'm walking one end to the other end of the terminal. So the time here is 1:30, that's the new departure time, but clearly we're not moving, we're still waiting in the queue here.
所有的人都在这儿等，我知道你们刚才预备了水，而就是吃饭的时间。航空公司难道或者机场不应该为我们这些乘客安排一顿午饭吗？不管是要不要出钱，对不对？
刚刚不是还说原地那个就登机口吗？我去上那个持有些人都不见了，然后问你们那个态度是什么样的
？11点钟要起飞，现在是1点45。那我就想到一个中国的法律没有保障旅客，就是说没有说法律到3个小时就开始要航空公司赔偿，就是现在也不知道几点钟要走，所以现在 delay 还是无限期在扩后在 delay， 所以现在大家已经比较鼓噪也生气了。So after 3 hours of delay, now we're heading out to the plane. Now, talking about in the US, the airport experience is somewhat a mixed bag because there's a lot of older terminals, older infrastructures. Airports like LAX, JFK, they're continuously renovating, but the space are very limited. So many terminals are still old, crowded, and running at full capacity. Another interesting comparison is airport lounge access. In China, if you're flying first or business class, your premium ticket gets you in, no question asked. But in the US, it's very different. Lounge access is mostly reserved for paid lounge members or higher tier credit card holders. So even if you're flying domestic first class in the US, it doesn't automatically include lounge entry. So next, let's talk about the airplanes, the fleet, and the profitability of the airlines between China and the US. So according to IATA, there are currently about 30,000 active commercial airplanes flying in the worldwide fleet. And guess how many airplanes are currently flying in China commercially? The answer is about 4,300. Also take a guess, how many airplanes commercially flying in the United States? That answer is about 7,000 to 10,000, depends on how you count with all the commercial airlines, cargo, regional airlines, and semi-private. So although the US has a higher numbers of active fleet flying, China is actually catching up. So there are lots of forecasts saying the next 2 decades, China commercial fleets will expand up to 10,000 airplanes. So recently, I've flown the Comac C919 in China. It turned out to be a surprisingly good experience. The airplane's quiet, it's wider, and also has more legroom and headroom.
你好，你好，哎，特别来坐这一班飞机的，好，谢谢，谢谢。哎，也是特别来坐的是吧？是，哎，很好，很好。怎么样？现在感觉？非常好，非常好。好，一会儿见。一会儿见。好，排在先生您坐哪个座位？我坐这里，这个位。那飞C919在乘务员操作上面有什么感觉不一样吗？
那最大的感受，像我们后舱的话，可以看到我们今天的话，这边是因为来回都是满客，那我们餐车都是配齐的。像我们今天餐车我们一共有4辆的餐车，但是当我们把餐车拉出来以后，整个后舱的服务舱其实是比较宽的，大家可以看一下这个位置。
就是说你这里位置比空客要宽一点。
So it was a pleasant experience for domestic flight in China. And the question is whether they can ramp up the production as the airplane is actually using Western engine and Western avionics, whether China can be self-sustainable of producing more in the light of all the tariffs and sanctions. Now, in the US, the fleets are generally older. A lot of old classic airplanes still roaming the sky, like the Boeing 757. United has a lot of original Boeing 777-200s. And the airline love to use these planes for almost 30 years. They use them, sweat them until they last. So if you look at the breakdown, the US fleet age is generally around 15 years. United Airlines about 15.8 years. Delta just a little bit ahead of 15.2 years. American 14 years. Southwest nearly 11 years. Where in China, most of the airlines' age of the fleets are under 10 years old. But there's one problem for China. In recent times, the economy hasn't done well. China hasn't placed a single major order on Airbus or Boeing since COVID. So if they place an order right now, it would take about 4 to 5 years of backlog for them to receive their new airplane. In a sense, I think China has a surplus airplane right now in the fleet. And eventually, their age of the planes will go up as they haven't ordered any new airplane to replace the older ones. Thanks for today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. I use it personally to bypass internet censorship, to find cheaper travel, and to secure my connection. Internet censorship can be a huge pain when you travel to countries where your contents get restricted or blocked, and this is where Surfshark VPN comes into handy. Simply connect to another country to bypass that restriction. Even better, you can use one secure VPN connection to connect to many Netflix libraries. With Surfshark, there are opportunities to find cheaper travels, cheaper air tickets, cheaper hotels, and cheaper rental car. Simply connect the Surfshark VPN to another country to check the prices. As a frequent flyer, I often use free public Wi-Fi at an airport or in the hotel. If you want to secure your connection and encrypt your data, you definitely need a VPN. So here's the best deal for my viewers today. Go to surfshark.com/Sam for 4 extra months of Surfshark. Now let's take a look at the profitability of the airlines. In China, airlines don't make money at all. They're losing money. But in America, airlines are making record amount of money. So what does that mean? The US airlines are enjoying the pricing freedom, the loyalty program revenue, consolidation, strong corporate and leisure demand. So on average, the US airlines are so profitable, their pre-tax profits was $13.5 billion. The major Chinese carriers are not profitable. Their losses reflect structural pressures, low yields, competition, oversupply, and weak international demand. So although Chinese airlines report record number of passengers flown in 2024, the average yield fell 10 to 13%. So the domestic airfare in China has actually dropped compared to before the pandemic, which is quite rare in any other countries because most of the countries' airfare has really gone up through the roof. Now let's talk about the core, the flying experience. In China, airlines usually operate under a full service model, so you don't have to check your bags for additional fees. And on board, you don't actually pay for your seat, and also you receive a free snack or a free meal on every flight. I also have to point out the business class fares are way cheaper in China than in the US. Usually, the difference between economy and business class in China are just a few hundred yuan. So it is not so steep compared to the US, where the difference could be 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times the ticket fares. In terms of passenger behavior, I think in China, not everyone has traveled. Not everyone's so polished as frequent flyer. So there are still people first time flown on the plane. And also when the plane lands, there tend to be a lot of people just get off the seats while the plane is still taxi. And the flight attendant has to tell everyone to sit down. So on my recent Hainan 787 domestic flight in China, I've noticed there are banners at each door guarding the door and telling people do not open the door. So now let's take a look at the US. The flying experience is a mixed bag because you have full service carrier like US, Big Three, American, United, and Delta. You also have value carriers like JetBlue, and you also have ultra low cost carriers like Frontier, Spirits, right? So out of all of these carriers, somehow you still have to pay extra for a check bag. You have to pay extra for pre-selecting a seat, and you have to pay extra if you fly in coach and want to buy anything on board to eat. One thing I noticed, the boarding time in US actually getting longer and longer because they charge $35 up to $50 for a bag. So it is much cheaper just to carry on everything, but that takes much longer time to get on the plane, to place your bags, and also get off the plane and retrieve your bags, right? The US market is extremely cost-driven, so the products also reflects that. The frequent flyer loyalty is very important in the US. It will actually helping you to save a lot of money by not paying a check bag fee, by not paying a pre-selected fees on the seats, and also receive better treatment. So the frequent flyer loyalty is a huge concept for US flyer. Next, we'll talk about the service and the cabin crew. In China, the crew are definitely seen to be more formal, more follow the procedure, a little bit more robotic, and also English is not very well spoken. So for foreigner traveling in China, it can be quite challenging and difficult to communicate around in the cabin.
得到这样允许可以关门了，拜拜，关闭舱门。确认前10公里标志。
可以看一下今天经济舱的早餐吗？
这个是我们今天经济舱配的那个早餐，然后里面有我们那个特制的青稞曲奇，然后还有酸奶跟一些小零食，然后还有一个比较特别的，就是有一个热的干点，是那个鸡肉的肉夹馍。
肉夹馍。
就是这些，对。
Now, come back to the US. I would say the flight attendant has way more personality. In a way, they are very casual as well. They don't have to tie their hair, and they have a lot of ownership in the airplane. However, I would say the consistency also varies. On some flight, you have really good consistencies, and some flight you just don't have a standard. The next topic is the punctuality and operations. So in China, there used to be a lot of delays because military control most of the airspace. I'll give you an example. In the past, when there are thunderstorms built up in an area, in China, the ATC do not have a lot of choice to divert the airplane around the thunderstorm cells. In some cases, you have to fly through it. There's no other alternatives because the ATC just do not have any leeways. Where in the US, I believe it is way more friendly. It depends on the pilot how they ask and how they negotiate with the ATC. And there's a lot more flexibility in the communication.
In the US, you can often ask to visit the flight deck before takeoff or after landing, and in many cases, the crew will happily accommodate. But in China, the flight deck is straightly off limits. The regulations are much tighter, so there's no chance to visit the cockpit at any time.
So overall, what's the verdict of this video? All I want to point out is the flying experience varies majorly between China and the USA. So in China, they have better modern airports with newer aircraft, and airlines operate under a full service model, but they have more formal service. But also the low fare, low yield translate to low profitability. Where in the US, there's more matured infrastructure. Airlines are flying a lot more older planes. There's a variety of full value or low cost model of airlines. The service can be casual, but also can be inconsistent. And the high cost of air tickets transform into a higher profitability for airlines. So what's your experience flying in these two countries? Share with me in the comments. Thanks for watching today.